it's Jack from Cultaholic.com and it's time to talk about AEW Graded. Many people were very, very happy with this week's edition of AEW. But what do I think and how good were all of the segments involved? There's only one way to find out, and that is by assigning each individual segment a lovely individual grade. That's right, it's time for AEW Dynamite Graded. On this show, there was a pretty packed schedule involving in-ring action, so we start off without even any entrances or anything, just the first two teams of the show in the ring, ready to go. This is wrestling, this is how we like it. I'm getting way too excited. It's time for the first semi-final in the tag team tournament. The two teams involved were the Private Party and the Lucha Bros, and just before we start, I just want to say this was a great match. I really enjoyed it, but did anyone else notice this? Did anyone else think that Mark Quinn of the Private Party looked a little bit out of sorts in this match? His high spots were excellent, they were popping off as usual, but it was just his movements in between those high spots or during moments of, I guess, normal chain wrestling. He looked a little bit sluggish and a little bit slow, and I just wonder, what could that be? Could he have just been having an off night? Could he be maybe feeling a little bit sick? Could he maybe be tired? Who knows? But I remember I once asked Joe Hendry, local hero, oh, he's not that anymore, I once asked the prestigious one, Joe Hendry, what happens if as a wrestler you feel a bit sick or a bit feverish or you just don't feel very good in the build up to your match? What do you do? And he was like, you wrestle the match. So maybe that's what happened. But yes, as I said, this was a really good match anyway. High-paced, high-octane, loads of great double-team moves from two excellent tag teams. The crowd were really hot for it, as they always seem to be on AEW Dynamite. The Private Party hit the gin and juice on Phoenix, but when they went to make the cover, the referee pointed out that he is not the legal man. And if you watched last week's episode of AEW Dynamite Graded, you'll know that my big concern was that often rules aren't adhered to that well, especially in tag team matches with the wrong man being in the ring or tags not being correctly executed, that sort of thing. And they addressed that in this match, to be honest, pretty much straight away, with the ref correctly pointing out that they were trying to pin the illegal man. And it wasn't even a mistake, it actually played into the finish of the match. The Private Party thought, right, well, we've hit our finisher on the illegal man, let's just hit it on the legal man as well. Makes sense. They went up to the top, but when they went to hit it on Pentagon, he actually turned it into a Canadian destroyer as he hit the canvas. That was a really nice and inventive counter, and it swung the momentum of the match decisively in the Lucha Brothers' favour. Phoenix did one of his insane Matrix-style, gravity-defying rope walk kicks on Mark Quinn. Pentagon broke the arm, and then they hit their nice package piledriver double foot stomp combination. And then just to round things off, Phoenix took out Isaiah Cassidy on the outside with one of his insane suicide dives to cap things off. And that was it. The Lucha Brothers got the victory and they progressed to the final of the tag team tournament. Ooh. This match, now I saw everyone raving about this match. I'm going to be a little bit conservative here and only give it a B+, just because, as I mentioned, all of the high spots were brilliant, all of those crucial moments in the match were great, but the glue, the little bits in between, were a little bit ragged at times, and I think that is due to Mark Quinn looking a little bit out of sorts. He's been a lot sharper in previous weeks, and I just hope he's alright, to be honest. Maybe he was just feeling a bit under the weather. But apart from that, all of that aside, all four guys really did deliver given the circumstances and put on a really good contest. So I think a B+ is a fair grade, and I think that the Lucha Bros are the right team to move on to the tag team tournament finals. Was it as good as the match against the Young Bucks? I'm going to say no. I thought the Young Bucks versus the Private Party was an excellent match, maybe the best match we've seen on AEW Dynamite since the beginning of the TV show, but at the same time, it was a nice hot opener to what turned out to be, in my opinion anyway, a really hot episode of Dynamite. Ooh, hot episode. Bloody hell. Next up, too short a segment to grade really, but we've got a little hype package for Wardlow. Remember Wardlow's hype package at All Out where him and that girl were jumped by some thugs in the car park and then he beat them all up in really exaggerated superhero style-y? He's got another video package, but this is just him in the gym working out and basically saying, look at my body, look how strong I look as I'm lifting these weights. He didn't actually say that, but that was very much the implication. The video package ended with hashtag Wardlow is coming, and I, for one, I can't wait to see what Wardlow does. It's gonna be, I mean, he's really strong, so it can only be good. Next up, no messing around, straight into the second semi-final in the tag team tournament, SCU versus the Dark Order, Evil Uno and Stu Grayson. What a name. Now, a few minutes into this match, as it was progressing fairly nicely, you know, the crowd weren't as hot for it as the first semi-final, I'd probably say, but it was progressing nicely, it was building towards a nice match, and then it was rudely interrupted by the inner circle. Jericho, Guevara, Santana, Ortiz, not Jake Hager, he wasn't there that night, but they all turned up in the crowd with tickets, they paid to be there, and made their arrogant way up the steps to a private box at the top of the arena. Boo! Boo, you dirty heels. There was a really cool moment in this match, again like the first one, involving legal versus illegal men. There was a moment where Kazarian had, I think it was Evil Uno in an O'Connor role, but the referee couldn't count because he was the illegal man. So then Grayson charged at Kazarian, and he just thought, right then, and he hit him with a Northern Light suplex, had both men's shoulders down, and the referee had to count, and then they both kicked out. And it was just a nice little moment of improvisation. It was definitely planned, but of apparent improvisation by Frankie Kazarian. We get little cuts throughout this match to the private box where Jericho's up there with his boys and he's cheering on the Dark Order. He's going, come on Dark Order, because why not? I guess he's a heel. Of course he's going to want the heels to win. And SCU, I guess, are affiliated a little bit with Cody and them as well. So it does make sense. But they're being obnoxious. They're throwing popcorn. I hope they weren't actually throwing popcorn at people in front of them. Although maybe they would have liked that because wrestling fans are so rabid. I reckon if a wrestler threw popcorn at you as part of a storyline, you'd probably accept that a lot more than if they just did it if you were going to the cinema. Another great moment was when Grayson was in the corner and there was a little brawl going on in front of him, so he just decided to get on the top rope and then walk across 3 people's shoulders to get to Kazarian and boot him in the face. 3 people, you ask, but there's only 4 people in the match. Incorrect. So he walked over his own partner's shoulders, then Scorpio Sky's shoulders, and then the ref's shoulders as well. It was a nice spot, really inventive stuff, and great job as well from Aubrey, the referee, on just playing a good part in the match, I suppose. There's an unintentionally hilarious moment as well where Evil Uno hits Scorpio Sky with some kind of it's similar to the End of Days, it's some kind of flatliner style move, maybe with a pump handle set up, and it looks a little bit contrived, so much so that the old school lads on commentary, JR and Tony Schiavone, think it's a counter, and they simultaneously go, oh, what a counter, but it's blatantly a move that's been hit on Scorpio Sky rather than him dishing out the punishment. It's a convincing near fall, but eventually SCU do pick up the victory and they progress to the finals of the tag team tournament to take on the Lucha brothers. I'm going to give this match a B+ as well. This is very much a case of style versus substance. So if that first match had all the flips and all the style, I think this match was a lot more logical, a lot more grounded, but I think maybe more of a solid match all around. But if I had to give the edge to one match or the other, I might have to edge it to style over substance, the first match over the second one, just because the crowd were a lot more into the first match. And we know that the Dark Order's gimmick hasn't really caught on as well yet as maybe AEW were hoping, but at the same time, I can't fault the action. I thought Grayson in particular, by the way, was absolutely superb in this match. Next up, a rematch from last week's AEW Dark, which was that unsanctioned match between Kenny Omega and Joey Janela. This week on actual AEW Dynamite, we've got the same 2 guys again, but this time in a straight up singles match. One thing to note as well is that as Omega was making his entrance, he was announced as AAA's Mega Champion, or the Mega Campeón de AAA. I think I've said that right. I think so. I'm so sorry for any Spanish-speaking viewers if I've messed that right up. But it was nice that they acknowledged that he'd won a championship in another promotion. That's very much the point here. There's a nice touch of respect between Omega and Janela at the start. They give each other a little fist bump, and then obviously Jericho's in the skybox just hating on Kenny Omega, which is a nice bit of continuation. They've hated each other pretty much since the start of this promotion, I guess. Yeah, that was really nice to see. And basically, it was really nice to see Omega having a Kenny Omega style match. One of the great things that AEW Dynamite has done has, I guess for me personally at least, it's reintroduced Kenny Omega into a more regular schedule, because when they were just running, you know, pay-per-views every now and then, I wasn't getting enough Omega in my life, man. In New Japan, when he was on top of his game, I think he was the best wrestler in the world, in my opinion. He was probably my favourite as well at that time. And then everything died down a little bit. And now that he's on TV weekly, or at least on most of the weeks of TV, it's great to see again. And it was great to see him in a singles match too. This one started off kind of technically almost as if they were proving that Joey Janela can actually wrestle. He is a wrestler rather than just a high spots guy, and that was really nice to see. And as the match went on, it kind of became apparent that Omega and Janela have a really good chemistry. Maybe an unlikely chemistry, but a really good one, which I really enjoyed. This was also structured kind of like a New Japan Pro Wrestling match, in fact, with, you know, a slow technical start, building up to a more frantic finish with huge swings of momentum, guys hitting big reversals on each other and big moves, and eventually it all built up to a crescendo where Janela, oh, it looked painful. He missed a swanton bomb on the apron, Omega got out of the way, and he just landed back first on the apron. It looked very painful. But we know that Janela deals really well with pain, but the door was then open for Kenny Omega to hit the V trigger and then the one-winged angel and pick up the nice victory. You know what, I know a lot of people preferred maybe the tag matches. I prefer this one. I'm gonna give it an A-. I can't see anything wrong with it really. They packed a lot into the time slot they had on a show with a lot of in-ring action. They didn't have that much time, but they did about as well as they could given the time slot. I really enjoyed it. Maybe it wasn't quite as good as the unsanctioned match on AEW Dark, but it was certainly in the same ballpark. And I can't think of too many complaints at all, really. A- is the grade. I'd have loved to see it go a little bit longer, but I understand why it couldn't. Next up, oh my god, this segment. This segment was absolutely phenomenal. This was superb. I absolutely adored this segment. Cody's in the ring, right? And he's about to cut a promo on Chris Jericho and the Inner Circle. Apparently, he also had an announcement to make. Shivani's in the ring with him. He's like, apparently you've got an announcement. He never got a chance to make that announcement because the Inner Circle were cutting him off with air horns and they were shouting at him. Jericho had a microphone at one point and the crowd were hating it, but in a good way. Cody has been criticized a little bit for taking shots at WWE, and I think that, you know, he's kind of toned it down. He seems to be doing it less so these days. But when he does, you can't argue with its effectiveness, especially at the moment when WWE's main roster product is getting criticized from all angles. So, you know, they're in a bit of a vulnerable position. Why not give them a little job, I suppose? Cody basically says, you know what, Chris, this isn't like the company that you and I both came from. There's no invisible wall separating me from you up there. I could just step between these ropes, get in the crowd, come up there and kick your ass. And the crowd are molten hot for this. Jericho responds by calling Cody an entitled millennial bitch, which is personally offensive to me, and also shows that he's been taking lines from Ronda Rousey's promo playbook, which is an interesting choice, Chris, certainly. He also tells Cody, look, it's 4-on-1. What are you gonna do, really? Come up here if you want. We'll kick your ass. There's 4 of us and only 1 of you. And then Dustin Rhodes' music hits, and here he comes, Gold Dustin Rhodes, and he's looking fantastic, of course. But Jericho goes, you know what? It's still 4-on-2. So why don't you just run away, because there's nothing the Rhodes family can do to touch us. Then MJF's music hits, it's now 4-on-3. MJF comes out looking really smug, of course, and Jericho goes, who would be scared of a guy in a scarf? Which is a hilarious line and really ironic, and just, it feeds into Jericho's whole deluded heel character, which is fantastic. But it's still 4-on-3, so who do we get to fully even the odds and make it 4-on-4? We get DDP to an absolutely insane pop. They all head up through the crowd, all the baby faces, and as they get near the top, the Inner Circle lock themselves behind a door. They lock themselves in a separate room behind the private box, and they're kind of taunting the baby faces through the glass of the window, and they're all like, ha ha. So Cody, in an excellent moment, maybe my favorite moment of the entire night, goes, MJF, give me your scarf, please. He wraps the scarf around his fist and punches out the glass, and it's absolutely superb. The crowd are going wild, and it all kicks off from there. They all brawl, they spill into the concourse. There's fans out there thinking, what the hell is going on? I was just queuing up to get a beer. Everyone's falling all over the place. There's security involved. The police get involved eventually. It's absolutely phenomenal television. It's superb. Eventually the brawl gets broken up, but it's electrifying. It's genuinely so good and hilarious at the same time, but it's such a good build to Cody versus Jericho. Everyone's angry at each other. Everyone's being separated. Crowd members are just screaming at Jericho going, you suck. There was one woman in particular who was very, very funny. And it was just excellent. It's what you want. I mean, from Jericho being dragged away going, that's what you get, Cody, despite the fact that he clearly lost the brawl. That's just phenomenal stuff. I'm going to give this segment an A+. That sounds like an overreaction if you haven't seen it, but honestly, if you have seen it, you'll know exactly where I'm coming from. This wasn't just a brawl in the back. This was so entertaining because every member of the segment has so much personality, and there were so many little touches here that made the segment more than the sum of its parts. For example, there was like MJF really cockily flashing the DDP sign to the camera as they were walking down to the ring. There was Jericho screaming that he won, even though he clearly didn't. There was Cody trying to rub Jericho's face in the ice cream stall, and JR on commentary going, not the Dippin' Dots. Everything in this segment came together to make it absolutely wonderful. A+ from me. I loved it, and I have no complaints at all. Watch this if you haven't seen it yet. Next up, even more tag team action as the best friends Chuck Taylor and Trent Beretta take on Matt and Nick Jackson, the Young Bucks. Orange Cassidy is this time accompanying the best friends to the ring, and he helps get the match off to a really hot start. I was worried about that given the whole exciting segment beforehand, whether the crowd would be a little bit burnt out, but they did a good job of keeping everybody's energy high with Orange Cassidy. I know that sounds like a bit of a paradox, high energy Orange Cassidy, but you'll see what I mean. He started off the match by interrupting the Young Bucks' pose before the bell and giving them some vicious super kicks tiny little Orange Cassidy super kicks to the shins, which was really, really funny. So the Young Bucks gave him a proper one, a double super kick to the face, he rolled out, and the Best Friends jumped them in outrage, and the match got off to a hot start. The Bucks dominate the early stages, they clear the ring, and they even do the Best Friends hug, which gets heat from the crowd. You can't be stealing another team's taunts. Meanwhile, on the outside, the Best Friends kind of regain control. Chuck Taylor waves to the camera and goes, "Hi, Mom," and that made me notice, it's just a little tiny moment, but it makes me notice the free reign that AEW give their wrestlers. There's so many little moments of improvisation, so many little Easter eggs to find in pretty much every segment of every show so far, and for good or for better or for worse, it does make the show more entertaining as a result. The Best Friends then got back on top, they cleared the ring, they did their version of the hug, which got a huge pop. Then they got the referee involved. He didn't want to join in, but it was all a distraction as Orange Cassidy got on the top rope, hands in his pockets of course, and leapt off into a lovely crowd-pleasing dive onto both of the Young Bucks. But the Bucks turn it back on. Eventually they managed to isolate one of the Best Friends and hit more bang for your buck and pick up a big victory. This gets a B+ from me. I thought it was pretty decent. Well, in fact, I thought it was a really good match. It's just that the crowd were a little bit quiet, given the excellent action we'd seen so far. They were always going to need a breather at some point. It got off to a hot start, this match, but then the crowd kind of quietened down. But they managed to do a good job of getting them invested again, bringing them back for the final few minutes. So B+ is the grade, and after the match, the Young Bucks grabbed the microphone and accepted Santana and Ortiz's challenge for Full Gear. That could be an excellent match. Next up, the hometown girl, Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, versus debutante Jamie Hayter. Hayter does a really good job of healing it up in her entrance and throughout the match, really, but Britt Baker's entrance is the most Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania thing you could ever see. She's accompanied by, I think, the Steelers mascot. She's got custom Pittsburgh Steelers ring gear, like her ring jacket's got the Steelers logo on it. Everyone's waving those yellow towels, the terrible towels, I think they're called. She's got one. This could not be more Pittsburgh, is my point. And it almost made me wish that I was from Pittsburgh so that I could join in. But my NFL team is the Baltimore Ravens, so I have to hate them. I'm just conditioned to. As people familiar with Stardom will know, Jamie Hayter is a great in-ring talent, and I was delighted to see that she proved it here. Yes, there's a little bit of bias because she's English, and I always like to see English talent doing well to unfamiliar crowds, but she looked really, really good here. She was healing it up well, her moves looked crisp, she moved well in the ring, everything you want from a debut performance. But she did lose. Britt Baker getting the lockjaw locked in, and Jamie Hayter submitting pretty quickly. I think that was the right call to have Britt Baker win in her hometown, but I do think as well that maybe Britt Baker gets a bit of undue criticism, especially last week against Riho, and this was the perfect remedy. A nice big crowd-pleasing hometown win in front of a crowd that were just never ever going to boo her. This gets a B. I thought it was a decent match, enjoyable stuff, but there was a little bit of a confusing segment that happened after the match actually, which I do want to mention. Jamie Hayter, all banged up and sore after losing, is about to give a backstage interview and then just gets absolutely jumped by Brandy Rhodes, who doesn't explain herself at all. We don't know what the beef is between Brandy and Jamie in the slightest, but I'm assuming we're going to find out. And finally, the main event of the night. Two of the biggest stars in AEW going one-on-one in the main event of the TV show. What more can you ask for? Jon Moxley versus Pac. As Moxley is making his entrance, Pac jumps in from behind, edge of the steel chair to the back of the head, and Moxley is down, and the crowd hate it, and it's so good. Everyone's just completely behind Moxley and completely against Pac, which brings me to the sign in the crowd, thank you to whoever took it along, which says Pac is a dirty diddler. Just like to clarify, we don't think the Pac is actually doing anything dodgy in terms of like sexual assault or anything. We just, diddler is the word that we coin on the podcast for heel, and it's really bad, but it's stuck with us, and by God, it seems to have seeped into the AEW verse as well. In fact, there were a few chants of Dirty Diddler, which I'm assuming, I'm not saying that the arena was packed out with Cultaholic fans, I'm just assuming that people saw the sign and decided to join in, which, you know, which is fun, I suppose. Once again, we're not suggesting anything untoward about Pac, it's just our word for heel. It's just our word for heel. Pac, because he's got the jump on Moxley at the start, goes immediately for the Black Arrow, but Moxley rolls out of the ring and Pac has to reset. And this sets up a really nice dynamic with Moxley trying to fight his way back into the match with little flurries of offense here and there, and the crowd getting really behind him. Pac was awesome in this match though, man. He hit a Falcon Arrow from the corner, he hit a 450 from the apron to the floor, but all the while, time was a-ticking because this match was contested with TV time remaining. That's very crucial. With seconds remaining, Pac goes for the Black Arrow again, but he misses it again. Moxley rolls out of the way. He hits the paradigm shift, but he's slow to make the cover because he's taken such a beating from Pac so far. He makes the cover. 1, 2, Pac kicks out, and time expires and it's a draw. The crowd are obviously not too keen on this, but I am. I think it's a really good booking decision. I mean, you don't want to have Moxley suffer a defeat heading into Full Gear. You also don't want Pac to suffer a defeat because he's, you know, one of the biggest stars in the company so far. You want his first defeat to mean quite a lot, his first singles defeat anyway. And I thought it was a wise decision to have the draw. We've already introduced the concept of draws with Cody versus Darby Allin, and I just thought it was a wise use of the draw the draw outcome. The crowd didn't like it, as I mentioned, but Moxley got them back on side by hitting the referee with the paradigm shift. He's kind of Steve Austining it a little bit, you know, he's a badass anti-hero. And that was the end of the show. Very strong end of the show. It gets an A-, it was a great match. I've said all I really need to say about it, so let's get on with the overall grade. The overall grade is also an A-. Many people have been saying this could be the best episode of AEW Dynamite so far, and I think I might be inclined to agree actually. There was consistently strong wrestling throughout, that amazing brawl in the concourse, and no real weak spots on the show. I thought pretty much everything delivered on some level. So an A- is the grade, a great show from AEW, and yeah, let's move on to next week, and beyond that, to Full Gear. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.